Around the turn of the century, train travel was one of the most common forms of transportation in the United States. I've always been curious and even a bit nostalgic about this era in time. I recall passing the Interurban historical marker at Wabi Park over the years. The marker talks about the Shoreline Interurban Railway. I was curious about the existence of a railway in my own hometown and wanted to find out more. Naturally, I went directly to one of my favorite places, the St. Clair Shores Library, to see what I could find out. After a little digging, I found myself down in the local history center, where Heidi Christein, St. Clair Shores Archivist, filled me in on all the details.
The interurban railways in the United States were electric railways. They were usually for passengers, but they did carry some light freight. Although there were dedicated interurban cars for U.S. mail, through St. Clair Shores, there were a number of lines in the area, but specifically in St. Clair Shores, the railway that was known as the Shoreline Interurban started in 1897, and by 1927, it was gone. There were several lines that went through the shores, but the one closely associated was started by a gentleman named J.B. Dyer. Unfortunately, his business went bust before the first set of tracks even went into the ground. Mr. Dyer had the franchise, and a gentleman, a businessman from Detroit named J.B. Mills, actually finished the railroad. It was connected to the rail lines in the area, including the one in Detroit. And by 1897, you could get on the train and go to Port Huron, to Mount Clemens, to Detroit, and that connected to other railways in the area. You could get from Detroit to Mount Clemens in 90 minutes. The fare was about 30 cents, and they would stop approximately once a mile. That's roughly where the stations were. It was sort of a summer feeder line, so people could go to the water, to the beaches, and to the other amusements that had been built up along the shoreline here in what is today St. Clair Shores.
While we were looking through books and photographs, I wanted to find out more about the train cars themselves.
They were built all over. A lot of them came from Ohio, some were built in Michigan. They were all US built, and there was a huge variety of cars. Some of them were fairly utilitarian. The ones, because in St. Clair Shores it was considered a summer excursion train, they were a little nicer. They had cloth seats. There was an area just for gentlemen with leather seats where they could smoke cigars. Some of them were really quite nice.
It's clear that the Interurban Railway was put out of business by the automobile. But how did the city of St. Clair Shores benefit from the Interurbans?
Detroit really exploded in population in the 20s with the growth of the auto and the related industries. And people had more money. So St. Clair Shores in the 20s and the 30s was moving from a farming community to a bedroom community to a leisure community. And certainly the Interurbans helped be part of that because you didn't have to wait to get to the destination. Part of the fun of coming to St. Clair Shores was riding on the Interurban. It was along the shoreline. It was a beautiful route. It was a way to make a day of it in the country. And it really is a very niche form of transportation that occupies a very small part of American history. But there were interurbans all across the United States, including all across Michigan, as far north as the Upper Peninsula. There was a Houghton line of the interurban, and they are all gone. They sort of were like flowers in the desert. They bloomed for a very short time, and then sadly, they were all gone. And there's just that whole nostalgia about, trains and clickety-clack of the rails and that kind of thing.
For sure.
It's just cool.